Yes, we are going to discuss about foodborne diseases or foodborne illnesses. Foodborne illness is a disease caused by the consumption of contaminated food, and this term is mainly applied to all types of illnesses or diseases caused by an organism or a substance or a material present in food and gains entrance into the body when such food is consumed. And the foodborne diseases are generally caused by faulty handling, poor sanitary practices, insects, rodents, or microorganisms. And out of all these causes, foodborne diseases are mainly caused by microorganisms like bacteria, viruses, protozoans, nematodes, and so on. And also, foodborne illnesses can be caused by the presence of various chemical substances in food. Now, there's a situation whereby you find two or more people experience a similar illness or disease after eating a common food, and we refer to that as a foodborne disease outbreak. Therefore, we can say a foodborne disease outbreak is an incident in which two or more people experience a similar illness after eating a common food. And the general symptoms of foodborne diseases are headache, abdominal pain, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, fatigue, dehydration, and fever, among other symptoms. These symptoms are general to all the foodborne diseases, but you will realize that there are other symptoms which are specific to different foodborne diseases. Causes of foodborne diseases. Foodborne diseases can be caused by cross-contamination between raw and cooked or ready-to-eat food. We know always that whenever we mix raw and cooked food together, there's a possibility of transfer of pathogens from the raw foods to the cooked food. And therefore, when we eat the cooked food, we shall suffer from foodborne diseases. Then it can also be caused by carriage of pathogen by food handlers, especially when the food handlers are not maintaining good hygiene and sanitation, or when the food handlers are carriers, or when the food handlers are having the foodborne diseases already. Raw ingredients used without further cooking, e.g. milk, eggs, minced meat, and also vegetables and fruits, because these foods are prone to contamination with microorganisms which can cause foodborne diseases. Failure to properly heat or cook food, that is a time temperature abuse. There is always the appropriate time and temperatures to which different foods have to be heated, so that if there is microorganism in the food, the microorganism shall be killed as a result of the heating or high temperature. So if the food is heated to that appropriate temperature and time, the microorganism will be killed and then the food will be safe for consumption. But if not, the food is most likely going to cause foodborne diseases if it has microorganisms. Foods prepared too far in advance. So food has to be always prepared prior to serving or prior to eating. This prevents the growth and multiplication of microorganisms, or their entrance will be prevented. But if the food is allowed to cool or stay for a long period of time before consumption, then it is likely uh, going to be infested, or the microorganism will get entry into the food and then they grow and multiply up to the extent that they can produce toxins which can result into foodborne diseases. And also, foodborne diseases can be caused by contaminated equipments. Once the equipments are contaminated, there is going to be cross contamination. The pathogens will be transferred from the dirty equipments to the food, and hence once we consume those foods, we are most likely going to suffer from foodborne diseases. Uh, Getting food from unsafe sources such as sewages, and this mostly affects the vegetables and the fruits. Once we get them, sometimes we want to eat them raw. Then once we eat them raw, and it has the pathogens which can cause foodborne diseases, then we are going to suffer from foodborne diseases. That's why we are advised to get food from safe places, or even if we happen to get it from unsafe places, we have to clean it thoroughly and cook it thoroughly before we consume. Then poor personal hygiene, like improper hand washing, uh, handling food with open cuts, dirty clothes, and so on, can also cause foodborne diseases, because if such happens, there is always cross contamination that will take place. Ways through which food may transmit diseases. Foods can act as means of transmitting diseases in mainly three ways, and this includes the food itself may be wholesome, but may act as a vehicle of disease transmission. And this, in other words, we are saying that we can produce a safe food, but after producing a safe food, that safe food can at the same time act as a vehicle of disease transmission. Why? Because pathogenic organisms can be transmitted through many ways, like e.g., through unclean cups, handkerchiefs, door handles, and so on. That's why we said a wholesome food can also act as a vehicle of disease transmission. Then the other ways through which food may transmit disease is through the food acting as or being or serving as an ideal medium for rapid growth and multiplication of a large number of microorganisms, especially Staphylococcus and Salmonella. So, if the food act as a medium which facilitates or which encourages the rapid growth and multiplication of microorganisms, then the food is most likely going to cause diseases, especially those foods which are having high water activity, favorable pH for the different microorganisms. They make the environment conducive for the growth and multiplication of the microorganism, and hence the microorganisms will produce toxins which can cause the foodborne diseases. Then also, food poisoning may be caused by agents other than microorganisms, and these agents may enter into the food intentionally or unintentionally, and this includes toxic chemicals, poisonous plants and fungi like poisonous mushrooms, insecticides, and pesticides. So these are the ways through which food may transmit disease. Uh, Classification of foodborne illnesses. Now, foodborne illnesses is mainly classified into two. We have food infection, food intoxication, or food poisoning. And then besides these two, we have also another class which is referred to as toxin-mediated infection. Food infection is caused by eating food that contains living disease-causing organisms. So these are food infection is caused when one consumes food which are containing live microorganisms. Hence, this microorganism will end up causing the foodborne disease. Then food intoxication or food poisoning is a disease which is caused by eating food that contains a harmful chemical or toxin produced by the bacteria or microorganism or other sources. So the food poisoning is mainly caused when one eats food that is containing the toxin or the chemicals which have been produced or secreted by the microorganism, which may be alive in the food or may be dead in the food. That means provided that the toxin is there, even if the microorganism is dead or not there in the food, then the food is unsafe and can cause the foodborne diseases, which is called food intoxication or food poisoning. Then the other category is toxin-mediated infection. This is caused by eating a food that contains harmful microorganisms that will produce a toxin once inside the human body. So there are certain circumstances whereby you find we consume the food which is containing a live microorganism. So when this live microorganism enters into our body, they end up producing the toxic chemicals or the toxins in our body and hence resulting into foodborne diseases. Now, the difference between food poisoning and food infection. Food poisoning or intoxication is caused by toxin, while food infection is being caused by living microorganisms. The incubation period, that is the time where you'll be able to realize the symptoms of food poisoning is 2 hours, while the incubation period for food infection ranges from 12 to 24 hours. The symptoms of food poisoning includes nausea and vomiting, diarrhea, and there is usually no fever. Meanwhile, for food infection, besides the diarrhea, vomiting, and nausea, one will experience abdominal pain and fever. The duration for food poisoning is 1 day, though sometimes it will be longer than a day. Then the duration for food infection is from 1 to 7 days, though sometimes it may be longer than the 7 days. Foodborne illnesses and hazards. Foodborne illnesses are mainly being categorized into 4. We have bacterial food intoxications, bacterial food infections, viral infections, then parasitic infections. Then besides these foodborne illnesses, we have what we call the foodborne hazards. These foodborne hazards include natural toxicants in foods. Then we have toxic metals and chemicals. And the diseases which are referred to as bacterial food intoxication are we have Staphylococcus, botulism, Bacillus cereus, Perfringens. Then those diseases which are categorized under bacterial food infection are Salmonellosis, Campylobacter, typhoid, paratyphoid. Then we have streptococcal, bacillary dysentery, brucellosis, cholera, listeriosis. Then those diseases which are categorized under viral infection include infectious hepatitis, influenza, then the parasitic infestations includes amoebiasis, giardiasis, roundworm, tapeworm, trichinosis. Then the natural toxicants in foods can occur in the following foods: have cereals, genus, soybeans, potatoes, mushrooms, and so on. The toxic metals or chemicals include the pesticides, brass, tin, zinc, fluoride, lead, barium, mercury, cobalt, copper, and so on. So we are going to discuss about these foodborne illnesses and hazards one after the other. So to start with, we can start by looking at bacterial food poisoning or intoxication. And under this, we have the first bacterial food poisoning or intoxication is referred to as Staphylococcus food intoxication. Staphylococcus food intoxication is caused by the organism or by the bacteria, which is known as Staphylococcus aureus. And these bacteria produces a toxic chemical or a toxin, which is called enterotoxin. And so when we consume food with this toxin, we suffer from food poisoning, which is referred to as Staphylococcus food poisoning or intoxication. The incubation period of, of this bacteria is from 2 to 6 hours. Then the duration of illness ranges from 6 to 24 hours. The modes of transmission, mainly diseases can be transmitted in four ways. Can be through contact transmission, we have can be vehicle transmission, vector transmission, or airborne transmission. So for Staphylococcus food poisoning, it can be transmitted through airborne transmission. That this is through droplet infection from nasal passages. For example, sneezing, and then direct contact with boils and infected wounds of a person who is having uh, Staphylococcus food intoxication. Then the symptoms include salivation, nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, diarrhea, subnormal body temperatures, and in severe cases, blood and mucus may be found in the stools. The foods commonly involved in this food poisoning are meat, fish, milk, poultry, sandwiches with egg, foods exposed to lukewarm temperatures for a few hours, food insufficiently refrigerated due to large bulk or high refrigeration temperatures, leftover foods with a craving. And this food poisoning, which is the Staphylococcus food poisoning, can be prevented by using raw ingredients which are free from any infection. Then we can also avoid cross-contamination. We can do heat treatment because these microorganisms or these bacteria are very weak. They can be easily killed by high temperature. So whenever we heat food to higher temperatures, especially from 60 degrees Celsius onwards, they will end up killing these microorganisms. So we can prevent this food poisoning through heat treatment or thorough cooking. Then we can do rapid cooking, chilling, and prompt refrigeration. Then besides that, we have to also practice personal hygiene. Uh, Bacterial food poisoning or intoxication. Uh, the other bacterial food poisoning or intoxication is botulism. And this botulism is caused by the bacteria which is called Clostridium botulinum. Clostridium botulinum produces a toxin which is known as a neurotoxin. And it is this neurotoxin that will result into the food poisoning when we consume the food containing it. The incubation period ranges from 18 to 38 hours, and the duration of this illness can range from 24 hours to 80 hours. And once that time is passed, then the person can easily die if the person can easily die in 24 hours or within the 8 days if it is not treated. Then the mode of transmission of botulism is through the spores of the bacteria. So this bacteria produces spores, and once these spores are produced from the soil, and once it is transferred from the soil into the food, and then we consume the food, we get the food poisoning. Symptoms have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, dizziness, double vision, difficulty in swallowing and speaking, dry mouth, paralysis of voluntary, involuntary muscles, and then death. Because these deaths would result from the respiratory problems that is caused by this paralysis of the involuntary muscles. Then the foods commonly involved are inadequately processed home canned foods, smoked products, damaged, leaky, and rusty cans or cans with broken seals. We can prevent this food intoxication by using approved heat sources, because these approved heat sources are the ones which can kill the these processes are the ones which can kill the microorganisms that might be in the food. Then we have to always reject gassy or spoiled canned food because they have the higher chances of being contaminated. And we should not test any food that we suspect containing these microorganisms. Then avoid not well reheated leftover cooked foods. Heat smoked food at least at 85 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes and then frozen it after packaging. Then we have to heat food to 100 degrees Celsius for a few minutes, because it is only when these temperatures are attained that the food will be free of the microorganism which might have entered into it, and or else we shall get the food poisoning. Then the third bacterial food poisoning or intoxication that we are going to discuss is Bacillus cereus food poisoning. Bacillus cereus food poisoning is caused by the bacteria which is called Bacillus cereus. And the type of toxin which is being released by this Bacillus cereus is enterotoxin. And this enterotoxin is released in the food. So when we consume that food, then we get the Bacillus cereus food poisoning. The incubation period can range from 1 to 16 hours. Then the duration of the illness, 12 to 24 hours. And this food poisoning can be transmitted through contaminated cereals, grains, especially rice from the environment. The symptoms: abdominal pain, acute vomiting and diarrhea, and there is usually no fever. The sources of food commonly involved here are cereals like reheated boiled rice, corn flour thickened sauce, Chinese fried rice, then we have spices. We can prevent this food poisoning through cooling cooked food rapidly and refrigerating promptly. Then we can also reheat food thoroughly and so that the microorganisms will get killed, and then serve it immediately after reheating. Keep the interval between cooking and eating as short as possible. So we should not delay eating or serving cooked food. This is to prevent the multiplication and growth of the microorganism. Then the next bacterial food poisoning or intoxication is Perfringens food poisoning. This is caused by the bacteria which is known as Clostridium perfringens. And this Clostridium perfringens produces a toxin which is known as enterotoxin. And this enterotoxin is produced from the intestine after when we consume food which is containing the bacteria Clostridium perfringens. And the incubation period for this bacteria is from 8 to 24 hours. That's when you will be able to to realize the symptoms of this intoxication or poisoning. Then the mode of transmission includes human feces via hands to food by direct contact. That's why we are always encouraged to maintain good personal hygiene, like washing our hands often before we handle foods. Then we the other mode is through vector transmission by insects like flies, which can sit on these foods. If they contain the pathogen, then they will release the pathogen in the food. Then cross contamination, and also in a raw meat from intestine or excreta. So those are the modes of transmission of this food poisoning. Then the symptoms includes abdominal pain, diarrhea, anesthesia, and sometimes vomiting can also occur, including mild vertigo. Then the sources of foods commonly involved here are meat dishes, reheated dishes, stewed and roasted meat, uh, poultry, then sauces, gravies, peas, and salads. We can prevent this food poisoning through cooking food thoroughly, cooling food rapidly to prevent multiplication of bacteria, and reheat thoroughly just before serving. We should avoid cross-contamination so that there will be no transfer of pathogens from infected persons or carriers, or from raw foods to cooked foods. Then also we have to always ensure that our kitchen are in good hygienic condition, and we should also ensure there is always a personal hygiene. Have to wash all fruits and vegetables thoroughly before consumption or before using them as ingredients. Then we have bacterial food infections, and the diseases which are categorized under bacterial food infections includes: one, we have salmonellosis. Salmonellosis is caused by the viable cells of Salmonella cholerasis or Salmonella enteritidis or serotype typhimurium, and the incubation period for salmonellosis ranges from 12 to 24 hours, and the duration of the illness ranges from 1 hour to 7 days. And these salmonellosis can be transmitted through direct contact by food handlers who are ill or carriers of the disease. Can also be transmitted through cross contamination. It can be from raw food to cooked food, or from equipment to foods. Then it can also be transmitted through vector transmission by flies and other insects. Use of cracked eggs or seafoods from polluted waters can also cause this bacterial food infection. The symptoms of salmonellosis include diarrhea, abdominal pain, fever, vomiting, dehydration, then watery stool, and so on. The sources include meat, poultry, dirty shelled eggs and its products, meat and poultry contaminated at slaughterhouse, high-risk foods like milk and fish, which are exposed to warm temperatures for long hours, seafood from polluted waters, open canned foods. Then we can prevent this bacterial food infection by purchasing meat, poultry, eggs, and fish which are thoroughly inspected. We should wash our hands often. Food handlers' nails should be trimmed and clean because untrimmed and unclean fingernail can act as a source of microorganisms which can cause disease, bacterial food infections. Then we have to keep our equipments clean and hygienic. Control rodents and insects. We have to refrigerate adequately. We have to cook food thoroughly at least to 66 degrees Celsius for at least 12 minutes. And then leftover food should be reheated quickly and thoroughly. Then the other bacterial food infection is typhoid. Typhoid is caused by the bacteria which is known as Salmonella typhi. And the incubation period is 14 days. The duration of the illness ranges from 1 to 80 weeks. And this disease can be transmitted in the following ways. Vehicle transmission through contaminated milk, food, and water. Then can also be transmitted through direct contacts by hands that are contaminated. Then vector transmission can also occur by flies and other insects. The symptoms include malaise, headache, high and continued fever, cough, anorexia, vomiting, diarrhea, bleeding from the bowels. And then the sources of this include raw milk, vegetables grown on sewage farms, especially if eaten raw, and contaminated water. We can prevent this bacterial food infection by ensuring that ill persons or suspected carriers are not allowed in food preparation and service areas. And then we have to use boiled cooled water. Boiled cooled water. And then there has to always be proper sewage disposal, non-leaky shower pipes, and we can use pasteurized milk. Then we have to ensure that we control insects and rodents. Then we can undergo immunization with the vaccine. Then the next bacterial food infection is paratyphoid. Paratyphoid is caused by Salmonella enteritidis. It's caused by the bacteria called Salmonella enteritidis. Serotype paratyphi A, B, and C. And the incubation period ranges from 1 to 15 days. And the duration of the illness is from 1 to 3 weeks. Mode of transmission, vehicle and vector transmission. Vehicle transmission through consuming contaminated food, water, so on. Then vector transmission by flies and other insects. Direct contact from infected food handlers. Then feces and urine containing the bacteria. Then the sources of foods involved include confectionery, frozen foods, and ice creams. The signs and the symptoms and prevention of paratyphoid is the same as for typhoid. So you can refer to the same symptoms and prevention of typhoid for the symptoms and prevention of paratyphoid. Then the next bacterial food infection is a bacillary dysentery or shigellosis. Shigellosis or bacillary dysentery is caused by the bacteria which is called Shigella sonnei and then also Shigella dysentery. And the incubation period for this is from 1 to 7 days. The mode of transmission includes direct contact with the excreta of the ill person with the disease or carrier. vehicle transmission by contaminated food and water, and then vector transmission by insects and other insects, and then the symptoms include abdominal cramps, fever, chills, diarrhea, watery stools, and this watery stool may frequently contain blood and or mucus, nausea, and diarrhea. The sources include moist mixed foods like fish, salads, milk, beans, and potatoes. And we can prevent this bacterial food infection by practicing personal hygiene, ensuring that those who are ill or carriers do not enter into food preparation and service areas. And then we have to cook foods thoroughly, and then chill food promptly, protect and treat water before consumption. Controlling flies and other pests, then we have to dispose of sewage in a sanitary manner. Then the other bacterial food infection that we are going to look at is cholera. Cholera is caused by Vibrio cholerae, and the incubation period is from 1 to 6 days. The modes of transmission includes direct contact with the excreta of the diseased person, polluted and contaminated water, food and aerated water, contaminated equipment, vector transmission, so on. Then the symptoms include severe watery diarrhea, vomiting, cramps in the legs, thirst, and rapid dehydration. Then the stools can be compared to rice water, and then creeping pain in the abdomen. So those are the symptoms of the bacterial food infection called cholera. Sources include fish and shellfish from polluted waters, aerated drinks prepared from polluted waters, contaminated contaminated stale food. And we can prevent this bacterial food infection by protecting food and drinks from flies and dust so that they don't get time to land on the food and then release the pathogens onto the food. We have to use always suitable disinfectants and wash hands properly to avoid cross-contamination. Then we have to dispose waste and excreta properly. Water should be chlorinated and boiled before consumption. That means we have to treat water thoroughly before we consume. Do not consume suspected foods, foods which are doubted, foods which we think contain these pathogens have to be avoided at all. Then we have to always ensure that there is thorough cooking of food to appropriate temperature and time so that the microorganisms can be killed. Then the next bacterial food infection is Vibrio parahemolyticus. Vibrio parahemolyticus is caused by the bacteria which is known as Vibrio parahemolyticus, and the incubation period is 12 hours. The mode of transmission includes contaminated seafoods and seawater, cross-contamination from saltwater fish and sea water. The symptoms include acute diarrhea, abdominal pain, mild fever, vomiting, chills, headache, and prostration. Then the sources include saltwater fish, prawns, crabs, and other shellfish. So these are bacterial food infection can be prevented by cooking foods thoroughly, avoiding cross-contamination from saltwater fish, Then sanitizing equipment and work surfaces thoroughly, and ensure that you don't use sea water for cooking or other consumption. Then the other bacterial food infection is enteropathogenic infection or gastroenteritis. Enteropathogenic infection or gastroenteritis. The gastroenteritis is being caused by the organism or the bacteria, which is known as enteropathogenic Escherichia coli, which can be abbreviated as EEC, meaning enteropathogenic Escherichia coli. Then incubation period is from 12 hours to 2 days to be able to see the symptoms within this period of time. Then the modes of transmission includes raw food contaminated with sewage, contaminated hands, cross-contamination of food, and careless storage, sewage pollution of water, and so on. The symptoms include traveler's diarrhea, infantile diarrhea, refuse watery diarrhea with mucus and blood, and then we have colitis. The sources include raw meat, poultry contaminated with excreta, salads, and other vegetables consumed raw. So how can we prevent this? We can prevent it by chilling food rapidly in small quantities, cooking food thoroughly, practicing personal hygiene, washing all vegetables and fruits thoroughly before consumption, protecting and treating waste, disposing sewage in a sanitary manner. Then the next bacterial infection is listeriosis. Listeriosis is caused by the bacteria which is known as Listeria monocytogenes. Listeria monocytogenes. And the incubation period just starts when the food which is contaminated with this listeria is consumed. The bacteria immediately starts to multiply in the gastrointestinal tract, and then you will be able to see the signs, the symptoms of the listeriosis immediately. Then the modes of transmission include milk, meat of the infected animals, soft cheese, salads, sausages, airborne droplets from contaminated drains, insects in drains, cracks, cutting boards, etc. The symptoms of this bacterial food infection include miscarriages and stillbirth, meningitis, septicemia in infants, the miscarriages and stillbirth in pregnant women. So the sources or the foods commonly involved include soft cheeses, prepackaged salads, sausages, meat, milk product, and also chilled raw chicken and unpasteurized milk. How can we prevent listeriosis? We can prevent it through proper maintenance of drains and grease trap systems. Then we have to do regular pest control, and there should be sound cleaning practices, and we should always wash any item that falls on floor before placing it on food contact surfaces. Then endeavor to discard food items that fall on floor. Thorough cleaning of food and non-food contact areas. Then we have to heat frozen and refrigerated foods thoroughly. Then we can do pasteurization of milk to prevent this food infection. Then those are the bacterial food infections, and now we can now look at viral infections. And the viral infections, the common one is the infectious hepatitis. Infectious, infectious hepatitis is caused by hepatitis A virus, and the incubation period is 25 days. And this infection can be transmitted uh, through food or water that is contaminated by direct contact with the fecal oral route of the diseased person or carrier. And then also it can be transmitted through contact with the hands of an infected person, especially when the person has not washed the hand. Vehicle transmission by consuming contaminated food, then polluted drinking water or shellfish. Then it can also be transmitted through vector transmission by houseflies or other insects. The symptoms include loss of appetite, abdominal discomfort, severe nausea and vomiting, dehydration, fever, weakness, and marked weight loss. Sources are milk and other beverages, shellfish, contaminated foods, and water. And we can prevent this viral infection, which is the infectious hepatitis, by maintaining proper cleanliness, prevent entry of persons with hepatitis or carriers in food preparation and service area to avoid contamination of the food. Then we have to control flies, cook shellfish thoroughly, and adequately heat milk so that the microorganism which might be in them will get killed as a result of the high temperature. Prevent contact of sewage with foods or food contact surfaces, because we know sewage contains a lot of pathogens which can result into foodborne diseases. So we have to always make sure our foods are prevented from getting into contact with the sewage. Then we have the parasitic infections or infestations. We have the first parasitic infestation or infection is amoebic dysentery. Amoebic dysentery is caused by the amoeba, which is known as Entamoeba histolytica. And the incubation period of this is from 3 to 4 weeks. And this amoebic dysentery can be transmitted through ingestion of the size of the amoeba in food and drink. And then also it can be through vehicle transmission by contaminated vegetables from fields irrigated with contaminated water. Then vector transmission by flies and rodents. And then it can also be transmitted through contact with the infected food handlers. Then symptoms, you have abdominal discomfort, diarrhea, constipation, or severe diarrhea. The sources of foods commonly involved in amoebic dysentery or foods that can contain the Entamoeba histolytica includes water contaminated with sewage, moist foods contaminated with human feces. These are the sources. Foods which are contaminated with human feces, water that is with sewage. Then we can prevent this amoebic dysentery by using boiled drinking water. Boiled drinking water is safe because in boiled drinking water you find the microorganisms are already dead, so they will not be in position of causing the diseases. Then we have to wash or disinfect uncooked fruits and vegetables before we consume. Very important. Then we have to protect food against rodents and flies. Food handlers should be medically examined periodically to identify those who are ill or are carriers so that we shall not allow them, or we shall advise them not to uh, enter in food preparation areas. Then there has to be proper sewage disposal methods to avoid contamination. Then the other parasitic infestation or parasitic infection is trichinosis. Trichinosis is caused by the parasite which is known as Trichinella spiralis, which is a nematode. And this Trichinella spiralis causes trichinosis, and the incubation period ranges from 4 to 28 days. And in case of heavy infestation, the incubation period can just be as low as 24 hours. Then mode of transmission is transmitted through vehicle transmission, through consumption of undercooked, infested meat and sausages. Then vector transmission by infected swine, rabies, rats, and so on. Nausea. Symptoms include nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, colic, fever, and sweating. And later on there is a muscle soreness, swelling, chills, skin lesions, and then severe manifestation can result into death if not treated. The sources: raw or insufficiently cooked pork or pork products containing live larvae of this parasite. And we can prevent this parasitic infection by purchasing, by ensuring that we always purchase and serve only inspected pork and pork products, because the ones which are inspected are the ones which are safe. Then we have to cook pork and susceptible meats through thoroughly to at least 68 degrees Celsius for 15 seconds so that in case the parasites are in the pork or the meat, they get killed at this temperature. Then roasted pork or roasted meat should reach to the temperature of at least 74 or to 77 degrees Celsius in the center of the cut so that the parasite which is inside will get killed as a result of this high temperature. So that means we have to, when we are roasting, we have to roast it thoroughly to ensure that the heat reaches the center of the cut with the meat. Then we have to freeze pork at the negative 15 degrees Celsius or lower for 20 days. Then or at negative 29 degrees Celsius for 12 days. Then we have to eliminate rats or any other rodents, and then there has to be effective methods of garbage disposal. So those are the parasitic infections that we can get. And then now let's look at food allergies. Food allergy. An allergy is defined as a special reaction of an individual to some ingredients of food. So there are other circumstances whereby you find sometimes when other people eat certain food or other people will eat certain ingredients, their body reacts in a unique way, in that there will be overreaction of their immune system to the food or the ingredient in the food. And when that happens, we say such individuals are allergic to that particular food or that particular ingredient. And you find that some people show abnormal sensitivity to foods that are harmless to other people. And those other people who are non-allergic, even if they consume that ingredient or that food, they will their body will not be able to respond abnormally. And these are the substances that cause the allergy is called an allergen. And allergens may be present in foods like eggs, wheat, fish, shellfish, chocolate, strawberries, and cow's milk. And the food responsible for causing the allergy should always be avoided. So whenever you are allergic to an ingredient or to a food, then you have to always ensure that you avoid consuming such ingredients or such foods so that your body will not have also an abnormal sensitivity to the ingredient or the food. Well, then we have looked at the different foodborne diseases, and now we can discuss about the dangers of these foodborne diseases. Foodborne diseases can affect an individual negatively, and at the same time, it can also affect a company, especially food processing companies or establishments. And at the individual level, the dangers of foodborne diseases include one, loss of family income. This one will be as a result of low productivity because once you are sick, you will not be in position of working. And if you don't work, that means there is a low income. And this is going to affect the uh, family. So you have loss of family income. And besides this, also this loss of family income can be as a result of the medical expenses that are being incurred in the treatment of the diseases. So once there's foodborne disease outbreak, there will be medical expenses that are being incurred by the individual. And also at the individual level, foodborne diseases can result into cost of special dietary needs because a special diet has to be prescribed for such an individual who is having the foodborne disease or someone who is allergic to certain foods and ingredients. Then there will also be death or funeral expense. So, in case the foodborne disease is not treated, it can result into death. Severe cases can result into death, and hence there will always be funeral or burial expenses that will be incurred. Then, lost working hours. A sick person cannot work well, and therefore, if someone is sick, the person will have to absent him or herself from work, and which is something which is not good. Then foodborne diseases can also be dangerous to producing companies or establishments as well, because it results into loss of customers and sales. Why? Because if a company has produced a food product which can cause foodborne disease or which has caused foodborne diseases or illnesses to the consumer, the company is bound to losing its reputation, and hence it is going to lose its market also, the market for the product that it is producing. So foodborne diseases can result into loss of customers and sales for the food producing companies. Then it also increases the insurance premiums for the company. Then there is always a lower employee morale because once the company produces products which are harmful to the consumers, and then the employee will chance that the employees will lose morale for working in that particular company because of the bad reputation. Then there is also increased employee turnover. You may find that employees come in and then they go out as a result of the bad reputation which is created as a result because of the bad product or the unsafe product that has been produced. Then there is also recall and lost production. So always when a product is produced by a company and that product has been realized to have caused foodborne illnesses, or that product can cause foodborne illnesses, the company will be forced to recall that product, and this one will lead to financial losses because the product has to be transported from wherever they are being distributed, and what will be when it has now caused foodborne diseases. And that's why I said that's why it will now lead to what we call legal claims by the victims, because the customer has got the right to sue the company in court. Therefore, there will be legal proceedings that the company will have to undergo, which may lead to jail time and then also cause bankruptcy for the company. So that's why it is always good to ensure that the food that is being produced is foods which are safe for consumption, in that they should not contain uh, food hazards, especially the microorganisms which can cause foodborne diseases. Then now we can look at how we can control foodborne diseases. Control of foodborne diseases. Foodborne diseases can be controlled in many ways, and this includes uh, food should be handled in a hygienic manner by all food handlers, and infected handlers should be kept away from food preparation or food service areas. And then cross-contamination from raw to cooked food can be prevented by washing hands and all equipment or surfaces in contact with the raw foods, so that there will be no transfer of pathogens from the raw to cooked foods. Then the time gap between preparation and service of food should be reduced to avoid long storage in a warm environment. And this one here is very important, because if that is not done, it can encourage the growth and multiplication of microorganisms, and hence they will release the toxins which can cause foodborne diseases. Then large masses of food which have to be reheated later should be cooled quickly to 15 degrees Celsius and refrigerated immediately. Food should be reheated thoroughly so that the center of the food gets heated to temperature high enough to destroy the bacteria. Frozen foods should be thawed carefully at temperatures between 10 and 15 degrees Celsius, and frozen food should be cooked till it has thawed. Foods once thawed should not be frozen unless it has been cooked well after thawing. Cooked foods which are to be served hot should be stored above 63 degrees Celsius, and then we should avoid cooling and heating food repeatedly. Leftover food should be refrigerated immediately to keep it out of the danger zone. Food should be prepared in quantities required and quantities for which adequate refrigerated storage space is available. This is to avoid leftover food, which can encourage the growth and multiplication of microorganisms, especially the bacteria. This will prevent perishable or high-risk items from spoiling when we cook, when we prepare foods in quantities which our refrigerators can accommodate. It will prevent perishable or high-risk food items from getting spoiled because they will be contained in the refrigerator. Then also we can control foodborne diseases by ensuring that suspected foods are discarded immediately without testing it. Then the kitchen and cooking equipment should be cleaned daily and regularly, and we should ensure there's regular pest control measures being taken. Then adequate toilet and wash basin facilities with a continuous supply of water should be provided, promoting good hygiene. Then high-risk foods like meat, poultry, eggs, and milk should be purchased from certified dealers, because it is these certified dealers who are recognized or well known for producing safe foods which are not risky as far as foodborne diseases are concerned. So with this, we have come to the end of our discussion. I thank you so much for your audience, and wish you all the best.